30 seconds. Forward. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Britton, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
About 1:25 at 700 WLW, speaking here with Aron Ranen, documentary filmmaker, trying to prove, in fact, that man did go to the moon, and we're looking for believers and non-believers alike. Room at 749-7000 to watch line 2, and today only the special Neil Armstrong hotline. No one but Neil Armstrong could call 749-3700. We'll have 3 lines there, leave them all open for Neil and only Neil.
The reason I'm here in your studio right now is to try to communicate with Neil Armstrong using the 50,000 watts of your station.
It's a flamethrower, I tell you. Mr. Armstrong, come out of your shell. This is your opportunity.
It was perhaps the most documented event of all time. But did we really go?
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
What do you think? Does it look real to you? I was 8 years old back in 1969 and had no doubt about what I saw on television. But now, more than 30 years later, I wondered, is there any way to prove that it really happened? I began a journey across America to gather evidence and, at the same time, see what everyday Americans believe.
Excuse me, do you think we actually went to the moon in 1969, or do you think it was a hoax?
It's the first time I ever heard about it. Really.
There is a possibility it could have been a hoax, yeah.
When the shadows and different things were analysed and where they said the moon was and different things like that, it didn't look real enough.
When it landed, there wasn't that much dust being blown away. Yeah, he's got a lot of little things that add up.
My journey begins in cyberspace. I just type in fake moon landing and presto, instant documentary. I discover a book called NASA Mooned America, written and published by a man in New Jersey who only goes by the name Ranen. I convince this secretive author to come out of his isolation and meet me at this Holiday Inn in Totowa, New Jersey.
Nice to meet you, Ranen.
Yeah, hang on a minute. Okay,
Nice
we
to
got
meet
unload.
Ranen is an inventor, author, and ex-member of Mensa, the elite club for those with super high IQs, a society he quit due to their reluctance to take on his controversial stance on the moon landings.
As soon as you see the foreground and the background go like this, you know it's a backdrop. This limb weighed 33,000 pounds, and it dropped onto the moon using only one engine. But on all, and I mean all, the moon landings, all 6 times, there is no crater, there is no dust blown away. This is typical of each landing. So the only conclusion is that this guy was put here by a crane. Okay, number 5 should show typical lunar landscape and sea rock. Is that the sea rock? And that is a clear letter C on that little rock right there. When you deal with sun's shadows, they're parallel. But here, obviously, this sun on the moon is strange, to say the least.
Hey, is the lighting halfway decent? Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface. Up now, and you can see the stars and stripes.
Renen's arguments are better than I thought they would be. The lack of any crater under the lunar lander, and these shadows which appear to go in different directions. For a moon believer, this is perplexing stuff. What should my next step be? What would you do? Try and talk to Neil Armstrong, right? Unfortunately, all my phone calls to Neil's office in Ohio are answered with polite refusals. Neil will not do any one-on-one interviews with the media. Why won't Neil talk?
Okay, ready for me to come out? All set. Okay, I'm on the top step. It's a very simple matter to hop down from one step to the next.
Buzz Aldrin is the second human being to allegedly walk on the moon's surface.
Where were you on July 20th, 1969?
I was on the surface of the moon.
Lack of gravity force here.
What kind of proof can you offer us that you were there? What can you say to us?
I'm an honest person, and I tell you I was on the moon. If you choose not to believe me, forget it.
Beautiful view. It's got something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
I used the phrase magnificent desolation, which on the spur of the moment seemed to capture the dichotomy of the magnificence of our being there and having accomplished this feat, and the utter desolation that described the scene that we had in front of us. Just no life whatsoever, no sign of anything, no breeze, no air, just the stillness of forever. And here was this magnificent little frail lander, the Eagle, that had brought us all the way from the Earth here to where people had dreamed about for centuries.
Who do you believe? Rene, with his analysis? Or do you trust Buzz?
But it's a gorgeous view.
I need more hard evidence and decide to dig deeper by examining each stage of the mission, from the actual launch to the moon landing, moonwalk, and finally splashdown and recovery of the astronauts.
12, 11, 10, 9, ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program.
Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
How do we know the astronauts were really in the capsule at takeoff and not hiding out in some bunker while others sat in for them? Simple, right? I tracked down the man who actually closed the hatch on the Apollo 11 capsule back in 1969. He and NASA invite me to Florida, America's Space Coast, to the Kennedy Space Center. Gunter Wendt is the last man on Earth to have seen the astronauts before their alleged moonwalk.
There's a cute little thing. You see these cable trays? They were all over the Cape before, and some of them were just a little underground. And the joke was, if you pull on a cable and it pulls back, leave it go, it's a snake. Because we have lots of black snakes here. Of all the people I have been in contact with, may they be reporters, regular people, college students, high school students, there was never a question raised if this was a fake or not. What kind of proof do you require? I mean, can you prove there was a World War II?
Gunter and I begin to retrace the astronauts' footsteps here at Launchpad 39, using this rarely seen NASA surveillance footage shot the day of the launch. Today, this launch pad is an active spaceport, launching all space shuttles.
Okay, this is what they call the flame bucket. The flame would hit the flame bucket and then shoot up this way.
Gunter is going to take me up the same elevator used by Armstrong and Aldrin back in 1969. Once we get to the top, I'm going to ask him the big question.
So you were probably maybe one of the last two people to see them in the rocket, right?
I was the last one, not the last two, the last one, right. Because after I backed out of the hatch was closed. I was the last one to see the astronaut in it, okay? I can still, when the hatch was closed, I could look through the center window and see him in there.
And they were definitely inside.
There's no question about it. I mean, if that isn't proof, I don't know what you can do.
Well, what do you think? Is Gunter telling the truth? Or were the astronauts really hidden in some underground bunker? After my trip to the launch pad, I begin searching Cocoa Beach for NASA workers and other Apollo 11 eyewitnesses who must still be living here.
Keep your eye on this, because you never know what's going on behind it. Ha ha ha. I own a cigar store, and every astronaut that ever went up comes in here. And sometimes Big Daddy comes in here. Ooh.
We went next door to the bar with Big Daddy.
A lot of people suspect the moon landing might have been a hoax. What do you
Oh, don't even go there. I seen it on TV. I know better. Once you see it on television, you know that's the way it is, you know.
Tell us, what was the personality of Neil Armstrong like when you were able to hang out with him?
He was very nice. You know, he'd come in and you know, it was never alone though. He always had 3 or 4 hookers with him, and they'd go back down to the hotel down here. And I don't know what went on down there, but I heard stories of things that went on, scary things.
At the bar, I meet Bob Tooley. Bob spent 30 years working for NASA at the Kennedy Space Center.
They were totally against black people out there. Let me tell you, let me say that up front. They were against black people being a part of it. In fact, I had people to tell me, why don't I go to Africa and start my own space program? I would ride up that elevator to go to my office, day in, day out, and there was that KKK sign up there. What I did was sat at my desk and drew me a black power fist on a little sticker. I rode down went to the elevator, I rode down the elevator, put that sticker on there. I told them about it. And they came and apologized and said that they didn't think that it was bothering anybody. And how can you expect it not to be bothering anybody? And you know, needless to say, if there was any kind of problem, if there was any kind of fake thing going on, I would be the first person to expose them people. But hey, it's true. It's true. We did it.
These guys are never going to quit, huh?
The next day, Bob agrees to meet with me and introduces me to his boss, who managed information systems at Kennedy back in '69.
Because if you remember, the S4 stage had to stay connected to it, put it in Earth orbit until they were ready to aim it to the moon, and the S4 stage was still a booster. It then directed it toward the moon. We had antennas that were watching the spacecraft. In fact, we can go get you a man who the antenna man is.
Hey, tell me.
Do you know the antenna man?
Oh, we know the antenna man.
So he'll know the data was coming from the antenna, right?
He was the one tracking it. It was his job.
That was the man.
He was in control of the antenna site. They're looking for people to say, how do you know that that thing went to the moon? Because apparently there's been some books written that says it never went like that. I know it's the first thing we all say is, bullshit. He's sort of using this as verification that, yeah, we're talking to the man who actually built the antenna site that tracked the vehicle that says, yeah, the data came down to my antenna station and we processed the data.
We're off to see Frank Byrne, the antenna man.
He must have gone back taking a nap.
Hi.
No, we just went ahead and ate, and he's probably 3 sheets to the wind.
Frank has tossed back a few drinks prior to my arrival.
I think you're going to wind up talking to you, too.
We tracked the first satellite in the world. We tracked the first everything that went to the moon, everywhere. This was one of the antennas that we received telemetry data from the spacecraft.
Yeah, you could, I guess you could simulate it, but it wasn't simulated. It was real life data.
They should ought to listen to some of our episodes on the Pacific with the Redstone and its hydrogen bomb stuff.
And what were you guys? And what happened?
Well, we're gonna test the hydrogen bomb and the damn missile. And we're not gonna talk about that on camera anymore. I have no idea what's classified and what's not. It's screwed up, okay? End of discussion.
What? Tell us what happened.
No, we're not gonna talk about it. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea what's classified, what's not.
Newly declassified film footage reveals what Frank was talking about. Operation Hardtack was a series of secret atmospheric H-bomb tests launched off Johnson Island in the South Pacific in 1958. And it turns out there was an accident. The rocket, armed with a nuclear device, lost control and exploded 6 miles above the island. As you can see here, the people in the bunkers were not expecting this. Frank sends me to meet his boss, Carl Sendler, who is one of the original scientists who built the Kennedy Space Center back in the 50s. He was also on Johnson Island during this nuclear mishap.
Guidance system failed. The thing went straight up. Now, we didn't feel too good in the damn blockhouse. There wasn't much of a blockhouse to start with, ne? That thing detonating right above us, ne? And there were ships out there with all kind of instrumentation to measure the effect, yeah? But this was not our responsibility. Our responsibility was only to get that thing up there, yeah?
Are you proud of the Saturn V?
Yeah, I wouldn't put it on my wall if I wouldn't, eh?
Carl receives fan mail, which he responds to not with an image of a NASA rocket, but with a picture of a Nazi V-2 rocket.
It's actually a V-2 with Peenemünde. And here, what I normally signed, Peenemünde.
I later learned that Carl Sandler was part of a group of Nazi rocket scientists based here in Peenemünde on the Baltic coast of Germany.
Now, when I was in Peenemünde, I was responsible for the construction of Doppler tracking systems.
These Nazi scientists worked under the leadership of Werner von Braun, building Hitler's V-1 and V-2 rockets, which rained terror on England. Their rocket development was based on original research by the American inventor Robert Goddard and the Russian genius Tchaikovsky. After the war, these German scientists were brought to America by the United States Army, where, under the leadership of von Braun, they were settled in Huntsville, Alabama. It's here, at the American Army's Redstone Arsenal, that von Braun and his team were given the finances to continue their research begun in Germany under Adolf Hitler. This would later lead to the construction of America's giant moon rocket, the Saturn V. I wondered if there was anything in von Braun's past that would motivate him to fake a moon landing. Werner von Braun died in 1977, and so was unavailable to me as an eyewitness. But among all his acquaintances, who would know him best? I find that his NASA secretary of 20 years, Bonnie Holmes, is still alive. So I head to Alabama, in fact, the base of the Appalachian Mountains, where Bonnie now lives.
Take my picture.
I was going to ask you about the moon landing, that Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong. Do you think it was a government hoax, or do you think we actually went?
I don't know whether it did or not.
What do you think? Did you see it on TV, man landing on the moon?
Yeah, sure did.
Do you remember where you were when you watched that?
I was at the house, sitting in the chair, watching TV. Yes, sir.
And what were you thinking when you saw Neil Armstrong step on the moon?
I'm just proud he got there. Yeah.
Do you think we're ever going to be living in outer space? People will be having space colonies. Do you think that's going to happen?
Might do it. Don't know for sure. Thank you. Watch that truck coming now.
Hi guys, my name is Aron. Do you think we went to the moon, or do you think it was a hoax on TV?
I reckon we really went.
A lot better things the government can do with their money than to send people to the moon.
I believe the moon landing was probably a hoax. There was a lot of things set up back then. The JFK shooting, Martin Luther King, it was all conspiracies.
Are you Bonnie?
This is Bonnie today. And this is Bonnie 20 years ago when she was von Braun's NASA secretary. Together we walk over to the library where she keeps her personal collection of von Braun memorabilia.
This is Mrs. von Braun, Dr. von Braun, and this is me. This is the exploration of Mars. I typed this manuscript back in the early 50s for Dr. von Braun to Bonnie Holmes. They say we have hitched our wagon to a star, but say, isn't that road bumpy? Affectionately, Werner von Braun. Looking back, I guess you would say he was handsome. I read an article recently that said Werner von Braun with his movie star good looks. It never occurred to me that he had movie star good looks, but looking back at some of these pictures, I guess he did.
He's a very handsome man. Were you ever tempted to have an affair with him?
No, we didn't have time to even think about it. But he was a married man and I was a married woman, and no, it never occurred to me. There's Dr. von Braun and President Johnson. Here's a good picture of President Kennedy and Dr. von Braun. Liked President Kennedy very much. He admired him. In fact, he had an invitation, he and Mrs. von Braun had an invitation to join them for dinner. The dinner was supposed to be the day after he was buried. Everybody knew what that big B was. Anyone who got a note that had that B on it knew automatically that that was from Dr. von Braun. Everybody recognized that.
Later on, I discovered von Braun's initial on this Nazi document, which directly ties him to the management of slave labor during World War II. His full signature can be found on this Nazi document, provided to me by the German government, in which he requests labor, including prisoners, for his rocket factory in central Germany. And finally, I found Werner's signature on this 1969 NASA letter, sent to an official 2 weeks after the Apollo mission, in which he admits being a member of Hitler's SS. And to quote him, "I would appreciate it if you kept this information to yourself, as I think it could only harm my work at NASA if all this were given undue publicity." The Nazi program occurred in two places: development on the Baltic coast at Peenemünde, and manufacturing at the Metalwork rocket factory here in central Germany. Inside these hills, in giant underground tunnels, 10,000 slaves worked at once building von Braun's V-2 rockets. Over 60,000 slaves passed through these tunnels. 20,000 of them died here. This is actual footage of the rocket workers, shot by the United States Army in 1945.
This document implicates von Braun in the movement of concentration camp labor from Buchenwald to Dora.
Mike Neufeld is the curator of World War II history at the Smithsonian.
You can see on it his signature initial B in his characteristic hand. In the last paragraph of the document, he talks about getting certain privileges granted to this French physics professor, such as wearing civilian clothes instead of prisoner uniform, in order to increase his enthusiasm for doing independent work. By the fact that he was in Buchenwald and talked to the camp commandant implicates him in the use of concentration camp labor in a way that no other existing document does.
Nazis building our moon spaceship? I had never heard of anything like this before.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing?
Very good. And you?
Great.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Come on in.
Sure.
Alex Baum was a slave at the rocket factory and amazingly enough survived, even after being forced to actually dig these huge tunnels.
We never saw daylight till the tunnel was finished and they brought us up. The first time we went out of the tunnel, we were like a bunch of blind men. We couldn't even see because we never had seen light for months and months and months. I'll go and get my stuff for you. I'm going to go. This is my number in Buchenwald und Dora.
And because they didn't think you were Jewish, you did not have a tattoo. Instead, you had a
No,
patch.
that's right, yeah.
If you were Jewish, it would have been tattooed.
Tattooed.
Did you ever see Werner von Braun at the rocket camp?
Yes, we all saw. I mean, anybody who was at the rocket camp saw von Braun, we saw Himmler, we even saw Goering in Peenemünde. That's the only time I saw him there. They used to hang 5 people a day in the entrance of the tunnel. I mean, who wants to see thousands of bodies, skeleton? I mean, that's all we were, skeleton, bodies. They didn't bother burying or anything. Like I say, you become bestial. It's like the president of a big corporation not being punished if slave labor is working in their factory.
I nominated him for the International Boss of the Year, and he won it. Because he was truly the Boss of the Year.
It's like a mass murder letting him loose because he invented something. You wouldn't do that in this country. You would still be in jail. You would still be. So, what can you do?
What would have happened to Werner von Braun if he were still alive today? Behind armed guards work America's Nazi hunters, the United States Justice Department's Criminal Division.
Some of the key individuals responsible for the great accomplishment of Apollo 11, the landing of human beings on the moon, were deeply involved in Nazi crimes during World War II. This isn't just guilt by association. It's not just that some of them were in the SS or the Nazi Party. They were personally complicit in Nazi crimes.
Arthur Rudolph was Werner von Braun's head of rocket manufacturing under both Adolf Hitler and John F. Kennedy. The Justice Department brought war crime charges against him.
But Rudolph was very much a de facto deportation. He was removed unceremoniously from the United States, and the Justice Department exposed him for what he was.
Which was?
Which was a Nazi criminal. Unfortunately, von Braun died before the U.S. government, belatedly in 1979, created this office and seriously undertook to investigate Nazis living in the United States. Had he still been alive, there is no doubt that he would have become a major subject of federal investigation.
How does all this fit into my proving the moon landing was real? On one hand, von Braun may have known that he would face criminal charges if he lost his usefulness to the United States government. That would explain the motive to fake a moon landing. But on the other hand, maybe he really was developing a moon rocket, and that's why the United States government continued to cover up his Nazi criminal past. In a way, our country's disregard for his Nazi crimes helps me prove we did go to the moon. Next stop is Houston, Texas, home to Mission Control.
Fire rages out of control in South Houston.
And history or hoax, one man says he knows the truth.
Now, 11 News at 6.
You can always trust local news to cover the important stories. CBS decides to do one on me.
5% of Americans currently don't believe we went to the moon.
It's a part of history that the whole world witnessed almost 30 years ago. But did it really happen?
Fire rages out of control in South Houston.
And history or hoax, one man says he knows the truth.
Now, 11 News at 6.
You can always trust local news to cover the important stories. CBS decides to do one on me.
5% of Americans currently don't believe we went to the moon.
It's a part of history that the whole world witnessed almost 30 years ago. But did it really happen?
11 News reporter Ron Trevino tonight with an effort to get to the bottom of what some are calling a lunar lie.
Aron Ranen is working for the University of Cincinnati, putting together an investigative documentary, trying to prove the Apollo 11 mission was no fake.
At this point right now, I'm about 75% believing that we went.
One thing he's looking at, what he says are inconsistent shadows on lunar photographs.
All the shadows should be going the same way. But if you look at this is going this way, but then this one is going that way.
Live at Space Center Houston now in front of their lunar display. Some people believe it was a set like this that provided the background for the Apollo 11 mission somewhere in the Nevada desert.
The Nevada desert, huh?
That's what some people say.
Okay, thanks, Ron.
These are the guys I'm after, the original Apollo 11 flight controllers, the men of mission control. So I begin to check out the bars of Houston. No flight controllers here, but I had better luck at my next stop. Believe it or not, I find the Apollo 11 re-entry flight controller, John Llewellyn, who is responsible for bringing the crew safely back to Earth.
I'm a space navigator. My major function was get home guys alive.
At all times, John had to be aware of how to bring them back.
But it will go down in history, we did it. We got it in some kind of a French archives. And once those pricks put it into something, it's all over. Proud you did it.
We look alike.
Hey, look, I don't make I'm very proud I did it.
That's right. We're all
And you
proud.
show me another motherfucker again.
So there really are space cowboys after all. By this time, I am so intrigued that I am carrying my camera everywhere, including Houston's famous Art Car Museum.
I think the technology was available to make it a hoax.
Then I meet these folks who have an art bus.
Hi guys, what's happening, dude?
Well, just another night in Houston, Texas.
All right. I'm trying to prove that Apollo 11 was not a hoax. I'm traveling around the country.
Hey, we went to Craters of the Moon. That's where they filmed that.
Where are you going?
We're going to our warehouse to have a Fanatics rehearsal. And you're welcome to come over if you want. You're welcome too.
I remember 1969, I was -5. So I really remember. I mean, I was not even born.
Coming out of the NASA area, I was there because my father was a minister at the church and the space community developing out there.
You're the son of a space minister.
You're the son of a space minister.
We had a few astronauts in the church there.
I think if we win.
You think we win?
Yeah.
Why do you think we win?
I just don't
Technology, we're so advanced now. We like evolved from like many different things.
I think it was possible. I think we win.
This is Johnson Space Center, home to Mission Control. It's time to try and find legendary flight director Gene Kranz.
Smile. FAO. Don't be mad. We'll get it up there. See how nice and leisurely it's been? That's the way it should be.
There is no question in
any real engineers, program managers, flight planners, or astronauts' mind that this was the real thing.
Roger, and for your information, we show you at an altitude of about 92 miles above the surface right now.
The spacecraft cracks the hill, and now we are not going to leave until we either land, we abort, or we crash. Those are the only three options open to us in those moments. We continued coasting down to the point at which we had to ignite the engines. I made my go-no-go.
100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward. 4 forward, drift into the right a little.
The navigation problem was taking us way downstream, and now it looked like we were going to run out of fuel.
60 seconds. Lights on.
And this was the final decision that we had to make. I made the go to continue the landing process.
Forward, 40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust. Great shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. 30 seconds. Forward, just. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Britton, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
I personally broke down. I just couldn't get going. The emotion overwhelmed me until finally, a few seconds later, I just slammed my arm on the console. My pencil broke. Got back on track.
Are you getting a TV picture now, Houston? Neil, yes, we are getting a TV picture. You're in our field of view now.
The moment that we touched down, there was a moment of a bit of extemporaneous looking at each other, and I patted Neil on the back as if to say, well, we really made it. But then we set about doing the other things that we had to do. Moving on the surface was quite easy. The lower gravity gave the overall impression of a slow motion world.
Maybe 4 easy paces can bring you to...
Everything that was happening aboard the Apollo 11 flight was constantly streaming down to antenna sites all over the world. From the astronauts' heartbeats to electrical use inside the command module, it was all recorded on these telemetry tapes. So where is this hard evidence?
I haven't seen anything that indicates the telemetry data is even in existence, and as I said, even if we had it, we don't have the machines to play it back.
But your own research has shown the telemetry data is missing.
That's right.
Could this be true? Mankind's first interplanetary exploration and the original science data is missing?
Apollo 11, this is Houston, radio check, over.
If it's anywhere, it should be here at NASA's Goddard Space Center in Maryland, home to the National Space Science Data Archives.
This film you're making now, what is it?
This is a film trying to prove that Apollo 11 happened.
Does it have a name? I mean, do you have a name for it yet,
I think you're calling it Did We Go?
Did We Go? Okay. Okay.
Doesn't have it either. The Smithsonian doesn't have it. Johnson doesn't have it.
Right. We've been unable to track it down. I mean, we don't know where this telemetry data ended up, and we don't know what path it may have taken. So, unfortunately, I'm afraid I can't really give you much of a clue as to where this data ended up and whether it still exists or not.
Most likely, these scientists just misplaced these tapes. Or did they? In 1969, the astronauts conducted 3 alleged science experiments on the moon, one of which is still in operation today. It is the Lunar Laser Reflector, which allows a giant laser on Earth to be pointed at the Apollo 11 landing site. Then, it bounces back to the same place it came from on Earth. I traveled to the University of Maryland to meet the principal investigator, Professor Carol Alley.
Okay, we're here at the office of Professor Carol Alley.
Ranen?
Yes, how are you?
Oh,
nice to meet you in person.
With a camera to your eye. Here is the Earth, and here is the Moon, and we have to send the laser beam through the atmosphere of the Earth, and the beam does diverge, and it will hit a spot a certain size on the Moon. We know that it's real because we know how long it takes to go to the moon and back. It takes about 1.28 seconds of time to go to the moon on the average, and another same time to come back. I'm demonstrating the retro property of the corner reflector. It returns the beam in the same but opposite direction. So it returns it parallel to the beam that's gone in, and you can see that here with these two beams. What's happening?
Are we moving?
We're moving. Kareem, what's happening?
If I can successfully bounce this laser off the reflector, it will be my best hard evidence yet. So it's off to the hills of West Texas, to the McDonald Observatory, one of only 2 places in the world which currently laser range off the moon. Laser ranging was originally used to measure the exact distance between the Earth and the moon. And tonight, the crew here has agreed to once again aim for the Apollo 11 reflector.
Right underneath that spot is the Apollo 11 site, and Ken is adjusting the pointing of the telescope so we point as absolutely as we can to something that we can't see. That's why it's very difficult to do that. Our light's going from here to the moon and back. And these corner reflectors reflect the energy that strikes it back to the Earth. And if we're lucky, that energy comes back into our telescope and we detect it. Did you get another one? Yeah, he's got another one, another return. There's something important at this part of the graph, and that's these dots along here that are adding up. And to us, that means that we actually have received our light back from the reflector at Apollo 11.
You satisfied that we have reflected off the moon as technician here?
Yes.
Well, gentlemen, it's time for the moon laser victory dance.
All right,
here we go. All right, let's see those feet moving.
We got Apollo 11. We got Apollo 11. Give yourselves a hand. We did it. Almost believing.
It turns out I celebrated a little too early, as I later discovered that the Russians had landed a laser reflector on this unmanned lunar probe. Could the Americans have done the same? The next day I wake up here in West Texas a little down about the Russian probe. So I take up an offer from a local cowboy historian to visit him on his ranch to talk about the Apollo 11 history I've uncovered.
So you got a lot of dead skulls all everywhere.
Yeah. This is a Rambouillet, a buck Rambouillet sheep from France. And you can tell by the number of curls that he was pretty old. This is a book on the 12th Armored Division, one of the 16 armored divisions we had in World War II, and that was the outfit that my cavalry squadron worked for. We were their recon. The Silver Star, yeah. It's for gallantry in combat. I had a bad day one time, and I got out of it all right.
Bill invites me to join him at a cross-cutting competition nearby. It's here I ask this decorated World War II veteran about Werner von Braun.
I don't feel too happy over the Berlin Wall going down, and anything German. I don't ride in Volkswagens here in the States. I can see why they took Werner von Braun because of his knowledge, and they wanted to catch up with or exceed the Russians. Who got ahead of us with Sputnik. And I can understand that, but I don't like it.
My next stop is Pasadena, California, where I'm going to examine what is perhaps the most absolute proof available, the moon rocks, just like you see here. I head to Caltech, one of the most prestigious science institutions in the world, where Professor Gerald Wasserberg, original Apollo 11 moon rock scientist, agrees to help me out of my dilemma.
So where are we in right now?
Oh, you're in a clean room. And I'm going to show you moon rock. Here's the moon rock under there. I don't care if it's a Hollywood set. The rocks are not a Hollywood set. They're not from the Earth. They're not from any place near the Earth or made on the Earth. They're not synthetically made. They cannot be generated within the Earth. And they came back in a box marked from the moon.
I believe Dr. Wasserberg, but I'd also heard that you could find moon rocks in Antarctica in the form of meteorites. And I stumbled onto these photographs of Wernher von Braun in Antarctica 2 years before the Apollo 11 mission. I asked the professor, can you get moon rocks in Antarctica?
Well, I got a phone call once, a fellow at the Smithsonian, and he said, Jerry, we have now a meteorite which I just brought back from Antarctica, which is from the moon. I said, Brian, that's nonsense. Of course, I said something stronger than that. The whole assembly of scientists attacked this object, and at the end of a year and a half, the conclusion was, it was Uncle Sam. It was a moon rock. There was no question that it was a moon rock. It was unambiguously a moon rock, just as later one could identify pieces of Mars.
It seems far-fetched, but it's evidence I can't ignore. Why would von Braun need to travel to Antarctica? Right at the time he was allegedly perfecting the Saturn V moon rocket. All this doesn't make my job any easier, but my investigation has to move on. I still have questions that only Neil Armstrong himself can answer, so I traveled to Cincinnati, Ohio, where he now lives.
All right, 5 till 2 at 700 WLW. Mike McConnell. Guest again, Mr. Aron Ranen. Making a documentary film trying to prove we went to the moon. It's not all that easy to do, apparently. Our lines are jammed. Everything but the Neil Armstrong hotline, which today only is 749-3700. About 5 minutes left, Neil, to check in if you can. Donna, how are you?
I believe we went to the moon.
What proof do you have?
Well, I don't have any, but I just, in my heart, I believe that we did, and I don't think the American government would think that the American people would be that stupid.
What have you uncovered, Aron?
Well, I am trying to prove it. And really, I can't find any hard evidence. But I thought was going to be an easy thing to prove. Suddenly we have...
It's not all that provable.
It's not that provable. With no luck at the radio station, I head to Wapakoneta, Ohio, birthplace of Neil Armstrong and his boyhood home.
Did you know Neil Armstrong?
I don't want to make any commitments.
Oh, you knew Neil Armstrong? What was he like?
Nice guy.
Can I talk to you about it just for a sec?
I don't think so. I'm busy right now.
Okay, I'm sorry. Did you ever meet Neil Armstrong?
Yeah.
How would you describe Neil?
I have no words for that. I don't know who you are, so I'm not there.
Hit the town.
I just met him.
You met him.
Why are people putting up a wall between me and Neil? I decide to try to learn more about this town.
The most redneck inbred town in America.
Inbred?
St. Mary's is inbred. Walpock's just a bunch of rednecks. The KKK used to run this town at one time.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they used to have a sign in the city that
right?
said, if you was black, don't let the sun shine on your back.
I ain't going to Walpock. There are a bunch of rednecks there. They'll kill me.
It was legal to beat up blacks after dark, if you were out after dark.
You call them after dark, you love people.
Yeah,
I think it's just been in the last couple of years black people started coming to Walpock.
Yeah.
There's like 1 or 2 families, that's about it.
There's no blacks in Walpock. No. People wouldn't know where who they are.
We used to have a noose outside of town back in the 60s that said, you caught in town, you're dead. I mean, a noose.
Yeah.
For blacks.
All right, well, we're here in Wapakoneta, and I guess you're one of the 2 black people that live here, or how does it work?
Yeah, I'm about I've seen another black person here. I mean, I haven't actually come in any contact with them, so, you know.
There's only 2 black people in town then, or?
I'll say 3 total that I've seen, including myself.
Now I'm learning more than I want to know about Neil's hometown. I'm on my way through the cornfields of central Ohio to the Armstrong birthplace. The Armstrong house. Strange, well maintained, with a ham radio antenna on the roof. Who is living here now? What is the secret of Neil Armstrong? Why won't he or his friends talk? What is going on here? I look for Neil everywhere, including here at this observatory atop a neighbor's garage, where as a boy he first studied the planet he was destined to one day walk on. Allegedly.
He had a nice personality.
He had a nice personality. He
Yeah,
was kind
he
of
had-
quiet. I mean, he never liked to
He
brag
never
about,
liked to brag.
Never liked to
anything.
brag about anything.
Yeah, we're proud of him.
I happen on the fact that Neil played in a local band. I tracked down one of the original members of this group, who has just returned to retire here in Wapakoneta.
I got this out this morning. It hasn't been out of the case for 5 years. I play clarinet and baritone sax and bass clarinet mostly. We had this little German band. It was called the Mississippi Moonshiners. And Neil played baritone and tuba.
He played the tuba.
Yeah, he played baritone, horn, and tuba. We had lights. It would blink on and off and on and off, and it would spell out Mississippi Moonshiner. Neil made that for us. We used to make model airplanes and fly them out of his window. We would tighten up the band on them, the old model that you put the paper around. And then we'd set them on fire and see how long they would last, and the neighbors would get mad at us.
Do you think Neil could have been part of a hoax like that?
That's the first that's ever been brought to my attention. Anyone that believes that must have a lot of oatmeal in their head.
If you could say something to Neil right now, what would you say to him?
Where in the world have you been? What all have you done? Tell me. I'd really like to know that.
And I'd like to know what Neil's up to also. But I travel throughout Ohio searching for him with no success.
Hornet reports a sonic boom a short time ago.
Time for the splashdown in recovery of the Apollo 11 crew.
Apollo 11 Houston, in the blind, Airbus has a visual contact. Apollo 11, this is Hornet, over. Apollo 11, this is Apollo 11, reading you loud and clear. Our position 1330, 6915. 11 Hornet, copy, 133016.
What if the capsule came from outer space and the astronauts weren't even in there? Or worse yet, maybe it was dropped by an Air Force C-130. There's only one way to find out, so I tracked down the Navy frogman who was the first to open the capsule door upon splashdown. He agrees to meet me aboard the original recovery vessel, the USS Hornet, now a museum in Oakland, California.
From my own standpoint, there is no question that it happened. And the reason was because I saw the command module come down through the atmosphere. I saw it when it was too high to have been dropped by any plane. I traced it with my own eyes. That was the most vivid memory I have, as it came down almost caught between night and day. I watched it splat with the chutes open. I watched it splash down. It never left my eyesight. When they came out, one of them, I don't know which one it was, said something to me. That was the first words that were spoken as they came out of the command module. Now, this is what they said, filtered through the gas mask. And I'm thinking to myself, what was that? I figured I have to reply back in kind. And not knowing what they said, I just mimicked it. Went roll, 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 roll. So that was the first exchange between astronauts and a human being here on the Earth.
I believe Clancy saw the astronauts when he opened the capsule door. But did they really walk on the moon? NASA claims that 12 people have been there. Commander Gene Cernan belongs to this exclusive club, allegedly being the last to leave the moon's surface.
I went to the moon twice, once in Apollo 10, and we came close, but didn't land. Went back as commander of Apollo 17.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December.
But being a commander, I was also the last to get in the spacecraft, so I guess I'm known as the last man to have left my footprints on the moon because I was the last one to have left the surface of the moon. You know, I chuckle. The shadow's not in the right direction.
Right here they claim there's a letter C on the rock. Are there any stage hands on the moon when you were there?
No, there weren't any stage hands on the moon when I was there.
I asked Gene why there was no crater under the lunar lander.
Thank God there's not a crater there. We might be in it because we shut the engine down some 3 meters above the surface. So, and we literally free fell that last 9 or 10 feet. And the reason we did that, if we kept the engine running all the way down to the surface, it truly would have dug a crater. The back pressure would have blown back up in the engine and probably blown us off the moon.
Did Neil Armstrong use the same techniques when?
Absolutely. If you ever want to understand what the infinity of space and the infinity of time is, you have to stand on the surface of the moon and look at the Earth. And look at the Earth, it's all its splendor, it's all its beauty, a three-dimensional Earth surrounded by this infinite blackness, the infinity of space and time which goes on forever. And it's a blackness that surrounds you, standing in sunlight, that blackness surrounds you. As I said, that's a paradox, but on the moon it's truth. We went to the moon. I was there. I know what it's like to be in 1/6 gravity. I know what it's like to be in a lunar module that's got one engine that's got to burn 7 minutes and 14 seconds, or you're going to crash into oblivion. Quite frankly, if people don't believe I went to the moon, they're missing a great deal of humankind's adventure. Perhaps one of the greatest human endeavors in the history of mankind took place, and we were part of it. We lived it. We saw it.
We'd like to share a piece of this rock with so many of the countries throughout the world. We hope that this will be a symbol, mankind, that we can live in peace and harmony in the future.
Gene seems like he's telling the truth, but remember, he didn't fly on the Apollo 11 mission. Now, at the end of my journey, I seem to have more questions than answers. Why are the telemetry tapes missing? Why won't Neil Armstrong talk? Why were the KKK allowed inside the Kennedy Space Center during the 1960s? And finally, why were documented Nazi war criminals allowed to work on our nation's most important and secret projects? Now at this point, because not even the most powerful telescopes can zoom in on that spot on the moon, I can't 100% absolutely prove that we went there. But the physical evidence should still be there, and experts predict that by the year 2020, tourists will be traveling to the moon, and you'll be able to see the landing site for yourself. Until then, well, what do you think? Did we go?